I'm a plein air and studio painter, and I travel the world in search of great locations and great subjects to paint. My favorite part about painting is teaching others how to paint. I'm in the northwestern part of the United States in Washington State. Washington gets a lot of rain, so it's very green, very lush, and very wet. So it's a perfect place to find small waterfalls running through deep forests. Washington also has a lot of granite. So when you go into these backwoods, you find a lot of streams running over this granite. So it makes a perfect setting for painting water and rocks. When we look at this subject matter, we see water coming from the background, running over this shelf of granite and spilling into this pool of water here. These rocks back here that have light on them, I'd like that light to continue out through the top of the painting into the distance. So let's give this painting a try. When I begin a painting, I usually use a paper towel. I dip it in paint, and then I roughly scrub in where my darks are going to be. What this does is it gets rid of a lot of the white on the panel, and it gives you a starting point for your painting quickly. Usually start with the Langnickel Sabletech number 44. The Sabletech is a replacement for the Langnickel 5090, which was a great brush that Langnickel used to make, but they don't manufacture it anymore. I think it's because the hairs on the brush were made from mongoose, and they wanted to replace that with artificial hair. They've actually done a pretty good job. These Langnickel Sabletechs are usually good for about 10 paintings, and then I throw them away. But they do produce the same kind of stroke as the 5090. You can see here I'm starting to introduce some warm colors. This is transparent oxide red. It's a must-have color. It's made by Rembrandt. I use it in every painting that I paint. It's as necessary to me as titanium white. Question that I get asked most is, what color black do you use? People will ask me if I use lamp black or Payne's gray. Well, I don't use black. What I do is I mix ultramarine blue and transparent oxide red together. That gives me a super dark color. And if I add white to it, I can get a warm gray if I have more transparent oxide red in it, or I can get a cool gray if I add more ultramarine blue to it. This is my Langnickel 5090. I can show you here what kind of strokes it makes. With the number 10, I can get these nice wide strokes, or I can get these broken strokes. I can get these sharp little lines like this. I use these quite a bit. Right here I'm still just establishing my blacks. Here's what I was talking about the light. I want the light right back here in the distance to be the same light that is on these rocks right here. So the light on these rocks will continue up through the distance on the canvas. And then this forms this S shape of light that goes from the top of the canvas to the bottom right corner. The local color of the rocks is a warm violet. So I use cobalt blue, alizarin crimson, and to warm it up, I put some transparent oxide red in it. If you want the color darker, just use more of the dark colors, the cobalt blue, the alizarin crimson, and the transparent oxide red. If you want it lighter, of course, just put more white in it. You'll notice that I'm really not using that many colors in this painting. You don't have to use a lot of colors to make a bold statement. There's an artist named Anders Zorn who used a limited palette and was able to paint beautiful paintings with just a few colors. He used a very limited palette. I'm going to turn this sandbar right here into a rock in this lower right hand corner. It'll keep your eye from slipping out that bottom right corner. Sometimes I'll put this black background in the image. It just allows you to see the painting a little bit differently. I'm still using the Lang Nickel number 10 Sable Tech. Let's do a little close-up here. Watch my thumb after I make this stroke. Keep an eye on my thumb. See how I spin the brush? When my brush is fully loaded with paint, I'll make my first stroke and then I spin my brush 180 degrees around so I can use the paint on the other side of the brush. Now let's look at just the brush part. So my brush is fully loaded and I make a stroke. Now watch, I spin the brush around because I used up the paint on the other side. Also notice how when I drag my paint into the black, I just barely touch the black because I don't want to pollute my brush. It'll start making my painting muddy. So I just barely pull the violet paint into the black. For the high values in this painting, I use titanium white, of course, and Winsor Yellow Deep. It's almost an orange color. I bring these colors together and then I merge them with the warm violet that I made. And I'll use any combination of this mixture for the high values. If I want it brighter and warmer, I'll use more white and more Winsor yellow. I do a lot of smudging when I'm working with water. It's just the nature of water. It changes values and color pretty slowly. Beginning to introduce the liner brush here. I use a Colibri number 4. On a liner brush, the fat part of the brush, closer to the ferrule, carries all of the paint, and the paint is released out the tip of the brush with a very small line, like a pencil line. When you're using your liner brush, the paint should be very thin. That's the only way that it actually works. So this is my brush cleaner, and I have a bird screen inside of the brush cleaner that's about an inch tall. So when I scrape my brush across the screen, the paint falls into the bottom of the tank. I use odorless mineral spirits. You can buy this at any hardware store or Walmart. Keep your mineral spirits about an inch above the bird screen. When you drag your brush across the bird screen, the paint falls into the bottom of the tank. And you have to do this before every color change. Clean your brush really good and then dry it. Clean it again and then dry it. Now it's ready to use. You have to do this between every color change. I have a lid for my tank. I can clamp it down if I want to for carrying it when I carry it in my backpack. I think I bought this tank on Amazon. It's actually a food container, but the bird screen was not with it. By the way, you cannot take this OMS, odorless mineral spirits, on an airplane. Every time I travel, I have to buy new odorless mineral spirits in whatever country I go to. The local color of the water is titanium white with a little cobalt blue in it. I'll put the highlights on the water later, but I'll lay down this color like this and then I'll smudge it, tie it in with the colors that are around it. And I'm introducing my knives now. I use two knives. One is a 1-inch blade and the other one is a 3-inch blade. I'll show you some more techniques with the knife in this painting and also in some other paintings. When you're applying paint with the knife, the paint is usually very thin. Not always, but usually it's very thin. You mix up paint on your palette that's very thin, almost milky, and then you scrape with the edge of your knife on the palette and then apply it to the canvas in the same way. You just kind of scrape down. It takes some practice, but you learn pretty quickly how to use the knives. You'll see me do these adjustments with my fingers quite a bit because lots of times your strokes are a little bit too dominant and they need a little bit of adjustment, a little smoothing out or breaking down the highlights a little bit on the strokes. So you'll see me do this with my finger quite a bit. Okay, I'm finally getting out my liner brush. The liner brush is for a lot of these small little details. Just watch this technique with the liner brush and pick it up and practice on your own paintings. I am actually looking at the landscape and picking out these highlights that I see back there in the distance. And then when you get a distance away from the painting, your brain helps the highlights kind of merge together. Now watch how careful I am with my knife in here. The water is not going to show up as a white water if you don't have a dark background. So that's why the back of the waterfall has to be dark. Now you also use your liner brush for dark strokes because there are also very small details in the distance that are dark. Use it for limbs on trees, darks and lights. Now I could get into a lot of details up here in the foreground underneath that water. And there are paintings where I want to do that. But in this case, I don't want to take your eye away from the main subject, which is this line of light that runs from the top of the painting through the middle of the painting, out the bottom right corner of the painting. I'll begin working this foreground, merging this water together, not getting into too many details, finishing up this rock in the bottom right corner. Looks like this foreground needs to be a little bit darker so your eye doesn't get pulled down into this area from the light. All these colors in the rocks that you see that make the rocks look like rocks are really just a combination of the violet color and the Windsor yellow color. Now this is a technique that I've developed that I really use quite a bit. Just get pretty loose and big and loose. See how it kind of ties the painting together? And I'll do this with dark colors too. You'll see me put on some dark colors here in a minute. See, when I lay these dark colors down, it sort of creates this illusion that there's something going on there. Your brain kind of tricks you into thinking there's other rocks and other things going on down there. Now, the last thing that you usually work on are the highlights of the water. If you put the highlights of the water on too soon, they get muddied up and covered up with darker colors and things. So at the end is where you start putting on the highlights for the water. Look how careful I am with this liner brush. And by the way, I'm holding my right arm with my left arm. My left arm is braced on the pallet, and it's holding my right arm, and it's giving my right arm a place to rest while I do these careful little details. Be careful not to do too much here. You can overdo this real easy, so watch how careful I am doing this. I barely, one little stroke here and then seeing what I've done, and I back off. And then of course the most activity and the most paint and the thickest paint is going to be right there where the water splashes into the pool. Now, I use this technique quite a bit. You take a dry brush and a clean brush. I do this to soften my edges. I'll drag the high points of this paint Notice I don't dare put my brush into that white paint. I'm just barely touching the edges of it. If you don't like something, just smudge it out. So here you have to put that reflection in the water of the distant light.